everything here is alive.
Stop! I know!
So we are talking about the axe murders of Villisca, also known as simply Villisca. This one is directed by Tony V. Valenzuela. Now, the story here is somewhat based on a true event in the fact that there was really a gruesome series of murders in a particular house, but the actual story here is a work of fiction. So the actual murders took place way back in 1912, and in modern day basically we have a trio of friends who decide they want to visit this kind of this house, which is now a tourist attraction, to basically film for a YouTube channel. They decide to go in after hours after their tour is cut short, and once they break into this place, spooky stuff starts to happen. So what do we think about this movie? Well, this has a strange set of problems, but let's talk about some of the positive first of all. This is a very strong start to this film, and the way I say that is the characters here are particularly well developed and particularly likeable and well performed. So you have a great setup for three characters, each of whom have a individual set of problems. The young girl basically has recently moved to this kind of small Iowa town from Chicago. There, and immediately almost she's got in trouble in being involved in a sex tape, which has kind of got out into the public. You got one of the guys is basically a bit of a bad boy, a bit of a troublemaker, down to the fact that his father was a criminal, and the other guy, his friend, is a kind of recently out of the closet gay guy who's kind of getting crap at school for that, basically, and also has got his kind of a backstory in regards to his parents' tragic passing. So each of these guys have got the kind of their own thing, basically. So they end up going in this house, and obviously all hell breaks loose. But the way the characters have developed, even in a short period of time, I think is very strong. So you really care about these characters, and it was really good. It was a really sort of good, first kind of like act of character building. You really root for these characters, and the performances are all very good as well, and very believable and likable characters despite their individual character flaws. And I've got to say, their setup's pretty good as well, obviously basing it in this kind of real house. And there's a great cameo from Jonathan Gryce, who you may know from the Fright Night movies, or Fright Night 2 specifically, along with Monster Squad and a few other things as well. And he's kind of the spooky tour guide, basically. So it's all set for a kind of a great setup, and we see these kind of flashes of what happened in 1912, where it's seemingly, according to this film at least, there's some kind of possession almost that takes place, and this is the reason for the kind of the murders. So it all sounds pretty good so far. So where does it go wrong? I've got to say, once the supernatural stuff happens, it gets a bit mundane. Unfortunately, the setup here it fails really in the execution. When we actually see the kind of the ghostly effects and things like that, because on the cover of this, you might think it's a serial killer or a slasher film. It isn't. It's a haunted house film. But it isn't very interesting. It's not really scary. It's not really gory. I mean, most of the time, these characters just seem to be kind of possessed and screaming at each other. And then we kind of see kind of ghostly images, but they're never really in a kind of that's shot in a way that comes across as particularly spooky or scary. There's not any very many jump scares, to be honest. So when we get into the kind of the spooky stuff, it's just a bit of a letdown. The actual story is just a kind of a bit meh, and the payoff, I've got to say, is a little weak. The way it kind of climaxes, it just thinks, oh God, it's just a little bit of a cheap payoff, I think. So it was a disappointing film. I mean, it wasn't bad. If we talk about the kind of the ghostly bits, basically, and you're watching this for a horror film, so obviously that is a kind of an important part to it. It isn't bad, it's just very mundane and kind of mediocre. But what makes it disappointing is the fact that it had such a good start. It had such a strong opening with characters that you really liked and were well developed. Unfortunately, when we get into the meat and bones of this story, it just falls apart because it just is a very forgettable story with very kind of few... I mean, there are a lot of effects, I guess, but it just doesn't use them well enough. So ultimately... this is disappointing, and in a way that's worse from a bad film. I think in a lot of ways, because I really wanted to like this film because it was such a great setup, and so few films you kind of didn't really care about the characters, and also they can be quite flashy, but you don't care. But this has the opposite problem, which is a rarer problem. So a bit of a missed opportunity, unfortunately. Not bad, just kind of mundane and kind of. Somewhat kind of generic when it comes down to it, but maybe worth a watch if you are a kind of a Haunted House fan. It's certainly not going to say not a bad film. I'll give this movie a 5.5, slightly above average, because I think the performances and the kind of the character work here was so very good. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.